Hello, I'm Aaron, the Dungeon Master Dad, and this is episode 11 of the adventures of Logan and Reagan and the heroes of Hamlet in the Temple of Elemental Evil. In episode 10, the heroes extinguished the fire temple. So now the air temple and the fire temple have both been defeated. The earth temple and the water temple remain. It's their plan to go after the water temple next. The earth temple, which was the weakest, would then be the only one remaining, the strongest, and the only one left. And in their master deception, the idea was that they will have allied themselves with the earth temple, and they're going to use that alliance as a way of destroying the greater temple that's in control of everything. That's the plan. So right now, they go after the water temple. So, dressing themselves in earth temple robes, because the earth temple is the only other temple that is still around, they make their way into the area of the water temple. Now, the water temple sanctuary or shrine has two sections, an inner section and an outer section, and then in between them there are some rooms where the water temple clerics live. The outer section contains a creature, an animated object called the Juggernaut. In the Temple of Elemental Evil, in the Water Temple, the Juggernaut is basically like a giant altar on wheels with sculptures of fish and other aquatic creatures on it. And these come like punch outward to hit you, but the most damage that the Juggernaut can do is by rolling over you. If it hits you when it's on the move, it can do 10d10 or 10 to 100 points of damage. Now, what we found when we played this, compared to when I played it 88, 98, 30 years ago, is that the Juggernaut was way more dangerous when we played in first edition D&D. We were sort of doing theater of the mind, describing the creatures and who they attacked, but without really having a sense of where everyone was in relation to everyone else, and making sure. Back then we used to, say, okay, the wizards who don't want to be attacked, they're in the back being protected by the fighters in the front, and the fighters all get an attack every round. Now we play with a battle mat, and we make sure that in order to attack, you have to actually be able to, unless you're attacking with a missile weapon, you have to actually be able to move adjacent to an enemy, and we actually care what your movement rate is. So back then, it would be like, okay, this Juggernaut is running around the room, and it slams into Kenneth the Cavalier, and Kenneth takes 10d10 points of damage, and it destroys his full plate armor, and he takes a whole bunch of damage, and he's barely alive. Turns out when we actually play it on the battle mat and follow the rules for how the Juggernaut has to slowly turn or come to a stop in order to turn and then slowly accelerate, it turns out we find that this thing is not too difficult to avoid being in front of. And considering that both of our main characters, Logan and Reagan, do the bulk of their damage at a distance, Reagan with her spells and Logan with his arrows, it turned out not to be too hard to actually take this Juggernaut down, which they did. So they move on, and they enter the area where the Water Temple priests are. And the Water Temple priests consisted of 2 third level clerics and 1 6th level cleric. That's Belchernag, the high priest of the Water Temple. So they kill him. Now, the Water Temple does have a bunch of, I believe it's trolls, that have been impressed into their service, but they're not really in this area of the dungeon. So the characters will take out all those trolls later when they do their mop-up of level 2. So the trolls weren't as much help as one would hope. because they don't live in this area where these priests are. Okay, so now they go into the inner water temple section, which is just a large room with a crystal dome and a pool. Now the pool is actually a living creature, some sort of alien or interdimensional life form that looks like water, but in fact it has this psychic powers to charm creatures and make them want to swim. Problem is, it's highly acidic. Would do 5 to 20 points of damage per round of immersion until there's nothing left. So what the characters are having to contend with is every round one character is having to make a will save, and if that character is failing its will save, they are trying to dive in the pool. Now, let me digress momentarily and let you know that around this time, Logan, who was a 6th level ranger, had decided that he wanted to be an arcane archer. Wants to get some special magical powers in his arrows. That is a 3rd edition Dungeon Master Guide prestige class. To qualify for arcane archer, he has to be able to cast 1st level arcane spells. So by the time of this encounter, Logan is a 6th level ranger, 1st level sorcerer. So essentially what he had to do was, in order to qualify for arcane archer, he basically had to waste a level. Because 1st level sorcerer spells at this level, the characters are like 7th level, it's not very powerful. So not wanting to bother with spells that the wizard and the other sorcerer can do much better, much easier, he just decided to take a couple of little useful spells like rope trick or animate rope was one of those. Anyway, so now we're contending with the fact that every round somebody is having to make a will save, and if they fail their will save, they're trying to jump in the water. What we were doing, what the characters were doing to save those people, and it turned out to be fairly effective, is Reagan would be burning up her 2nd level spells, and being a sorceress of 7th level by now, she has quite a few of them. Anytime somebody goes trying to jump in the water, she casts levitate on them, so they go trying to take a dive, and they don't go down. And then Logan would cast animate rope on his rope, let it automatically wrap around their foot and like drag them over. So we keep them like sort of until we can get the person back into their senses. They're sort of flailing about in midair, not being able to get any traction on anything, so they can't jump in the water. Actually worked. It was a pretty good idea Logan and Reagan had when I believe Murphles tried to take a dive. So they're dealing with that, and at the same time they've got to figure out how to destroy this water creature. How to kill it. It's got 100 hit points, and basically weapons aren't going to work on it. There are various spells like Cone of Cold or Ice Storm will paralyze it or slow it down. They never actually figured that out. But there are a few things that will actually do damage to it. A vial of holy water will do 1 to 4 points of damage. Take a lot of it. The spell Lower Water would do 4 to 32 or 4d8. Part Water, 3 to 18 or 3d6. Purify Food and Drink would do 5 to 40, that's 5d8. And Purify Water would do 10 to 60, that's 10d6, like a maximum damage fireball. And just pouring in a gallon of pure water, not even holy water, would do a point of damage. Ultimately, they didn't have access to Lower Water, Part Water, and I don't think they used Purify Food and Drink. I don't think they had it memorized at the time, or Purify Water. So ultimately what they ended up doing was they used all the holy water they had. They could tell when they tried pouring holy water in that the creature was taking damage. They sort of felt the psychic shock that the creature was in pain. So they figured they just had to keep that up. And also when they just tried regular water, that worked too. So they, I believe they went to where they had found on level 1, there were some storerooms with full 60-gallon barrels of water. I mean, how many gallons are in a full barrel? 30-gallon barrels of water. Anyway, took about a half a dozen of these barrels, rolled them down there. Fortunately, they didn't have to go downstairs because there's a ramp between level 1 and level 2. So they brought some of those down, and they brought these casks into the room, and they start, using their water skins to just dump water in there. Literally, it took them like half an hour. There were rolls for wandering monsters. They got lucky. I don't think they had any wandering monsters. They also used the bless water spell like they had used in the fire temple to turn some of the water. They quickly ran out of those spells, but they turned some of the water in the water skins into holy water, so they were doing 1 to 4 instead of just 1. In any event, after about a half hour of just essentially ladling water into this thing, all of their characters with weak will scores are floating in the air, and they and probably didn't take that long. There is duration to the levitate spell. Wouldn't take a half an hour to open up a barrel and give it a couple of strong characters like Shrek and Logan. Logan's not nearly as strong, but a couple of strong characters could upend a barrel into the thing. And how many gallons is that? It's going to take a certain amount of damage. Again, they made as much of it into holy water as they could. Eventually, the thing hit 0 hit points. At that point, the charm was broken. Also, they did use spells like Dispel Magic to break the charm of the characters as much as they could until they ran out of those because it kept trying to charm people. So there was a danger of everybody being charmed. Fortunately, some characters, depending on their character class, had very high bonuses to their saving throw. So maybe about half the party had been charmed and was being restrained while the other half was working on dumping in the pure water to kill this. Finally, as I said, it hit 0 hit points. The crystal dome shattered. Now, when the crystal dome shattered, glass rained down on the whole party. Everybody took 1 to 12 points of damage, and the creature was dead. The water temple was nullified. The shrine, the power of the water temple was no more. They started looking through the crystals all over the floor, trying to see if they could find any that are valuable. They had the idea, hey, maybe there's some diamonds hidden in here, or some of the crystals are blue, maybe some sapphires or rubies, whatever. Probably not rubies, those would have stood out. But green and blue, sapphires and emeralds, it was all green, blue, and white water colors. So they're looking through it, trying to see if there's anything valuable. They didn't find gems among the crystals, but they did find a scroll case. And they open up the scroll case, and they find a poem inside. And the poem says, "On 3 in 6 lies 9, but none shall ever see. Vile good, cloaked by fair evil for all eternity. Will you answer, answerer? Where is your power, pray? With the whelp of Mederic, and there until doomsday." Now, the players quickly figured out that there's something somewhere on level 3. They were trying to figure what's on 3 in 6 lies 9 mean. And they think, okay, it's something on level 3. Now the first thing they thought was, maybe it's room number 6 on level 3. But they thought about it and they realized that, the room numbers are only numbered on the Dungeon Master's map. They're not like really designated as room numbers. That would be kind of silly. Although Gary Gygax did do something kind of in-game silly with the 9. So I'll get to that in a second. Excuse me. So then they speculated perhaps there's a hexagonal room on level 3. That would make more sense. On 3 in 6. Don't know what the 9 means. They asked for a skill check using whatever the appropriate knowledge skill is, to see if they could figure out what's Metric, because it said with the whelp of Metric. And they made a skill check in their knowledge geography skill, and someone made the roll, and so I revealed to them that Metric is the capital of the kingdom of Voluna. Now this allows most of the rest to fall into place, because the whelp of Metric is Prince Thrommel, who is a 9th level paladin. So let's, give Gary a little rap on the head for that one. So, might be better to say he's 9th in line for the throne, or he's the 9th heir, or 9th, he will be the 9th, if he's first in line for the throne, will be the 9th king in his dynasty, something like that. Because saying on 3 and 6 lies 9, that it's a 9th level paladin, that would assume that characters in-game know what level they are, which doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. Players obviously know what level they are, but from the characters themselves, it's just sort of a ridiculous game mechanic. Anyway, they know from our first, if you went back, I'm not saying you should go back, but if you go back to the the second episode, when they actually get to the village of Hamlet, and they're looking for missing elves, which we still haven't found. They learned in talking to the people in Hamlet and saying, hey, we're looking for these missing elves. People in Hamlet said, hey, did you hear that Prince Thrommel's missing too? It's all the news all over the kingdoms, even all the way down here to the south of Voluna and Furiundi. Prince Thrommel, the heir to the throne of Voluna, he's been missing for several weeks, and he was supposed to marry Princess Jolene of Furiundi. So the party had heard all about that before they ever went into the temple. Back on their first day in Hamlet, long ago at this point. So now the party is fairly certain that the missing elves have got to be somewhere in this temple. And now they've destroyed 3 of the 4 minor temples. They're ready to take the highest positions within the Earth Temple, get the leader of the Earth Temple to introduce them to the high priest of the entire Temple of Elemental Evil, and their plans are about to come to fruition. They figure once they can take him out, cut the head off the snake, so to speak, then they're going to start mopping up level by level until they find what they're looking for, until they find these elves, and until they find Prince Thrommel. Now they want to find Prince Thrommel as well. Now, when this happens, they're going to find out that they need to find something else too, but they don't know that yet. Find out about that next week. And that is going to bring us to what's going to ultimately be the climax, but we're not even close yet. In the meantime, next week, we will be going after the high priest of the entire Temple of Elemental Evil and the priest of the Earth Temple at the same time. Take them both in one shot. As I said, that's cutting the head off the snake. And until then, remember, you know what to remember. Don't kill your kids' characters. That's what the NPCs are for.